Let me say it again. Our forces are not and will not be engaged in the conflict with Russia in Ukraine. Our forces are not going to Europe to fight in Ukraine.
Ukraine is on a counterattack or on a counteroffensive towards Russia, claiming that they will be able to regain some territory or all the territory that has been invaded by Russia. How realistic is that? Can actually happen? And if so, in how much time and how much effort would that be able to happen? These are a few of the things that I'm going to be discussing with you today. So without any further ado, let's go straight into our video. Hi, my name is Booth and welcome to Crypto Vagabonds YouTube channel. In this channel, we talk about cryptocurrencies, geopolitics, macrofinance, and everything else that may affect the performance of your favorite crypto asset. If you do like this kind of content, please subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell. Now let's get into the video about Ukraine on the counteroffensive or Ukraine counterattacking Russia. And here we have it. We are now on the counterattack. I think since the 4th of June is pretty much admitted by Zelensky that Ukraine is counterattacking Russia. But how hard is that counterattack? What does it mean? What needs to happen? Today we're going to be discussing that, and we're going to be discussing four major subjects. First, we're going to be talking about the West and Ukraine. Then we're going to be talking about the geography. As you can see the map here, we're going to be discussing the geography, what it means, which areas they will be able to counterattack, or which areas will be more efficient if they counterattack, what needs to happen. Also, we're going to be talking about the obstacles, what they are up against, because a lot of people talk about counterattack and they may not know what the obstacles are there. We're also going to be talking about history, when certain wars came to a truce or a peace, and what was required for that to happen. So first, let's talk about the West and Ukraine. I chose this picture because here's Zelensky speaking, and here is the head of NATO, Stoltenberg, looking a bit puzzled. And I think this picture really shows my view, at least my opinion, on the West and Ukraine. I also chose this picture here of Biden kind of praying. This is me trying to throw a little bit of humor into this. But what I want to say with this is I think the West has not yet decided if they can afford to have or if they want Ukraine to win. I think there's still a question mark on the West in terms of can we afford, or is it interesting for us to have Ukraine win or just not have Ukraine to lose? Because the thing is, if you look at the conflict, it took over a year before the West actually gave significant help in terms of infrastructure and gear for Ukraine. Yes, there has been money, but it was a very slow process. When we're going to look at other wars in the past, as an example, we're going to see the West was much faster at reacting. And I think they don't know yet if they want Ukraine to win. That's my view. And also, there was a lot of skepticism about this actually happening. And you can see here on these headlines, it was February 9th, 2022, less than 2 weeks, or about 2 weeks to the invasion, which was on the 24th. So precisely 2 weeks. And you can see here Al Jazeera saying, no, Russia will not invade Ukraine. That was pretty much an affirmation on the side of Al Jazeera. You can see here, even in February 21st, Ukraine crisis, 5 reasons why Putin might not invade. So the West was kind of, I don't know how, because the whole reason for this conflict, if you at least ask Vladimir Putin, is the fact that Ukraine is about to become part of NATO. And they made several warnings since the year 2008 that that would not happen. But as you can see here, February 21st, there are still headlines talking about there will be no invasion. And remember, the invasion began on February 24th. And another one here, February 22nd, Australia was the one to say about imposing sanctions against Russia and warning Russia in case there will be a full invasion within 24 hours. It didn't take 24 hours, it took a little bit more, but the thing is, the invasion did occur. And I'm going to be playing here a little bit of what happened on 24th when Biden talked about the invasion.
Good afternoon. The Russian military has begun a brutal assault on the people of Ukraine. Without provocation, without justification, without necessity, this is a premeditated attack. Vladimir Putin has been planning this for months, as we've been saying all along.
Now, you can see the contradiction. First, there will be no invasion now. They have been saying this all along. And in my opinion, at least, I also want to know what is your opinion. In my opinion, this whole thing is about Ukraine being part of NATO. That could be easily avoided. At least that's my view. If you don't agree with me, please let me know on the comments below.
He moved more than 175,000 troops, military equipment and positions along the Ukrainian border. He moved blood supplies into position and built a field hospital, which tells you all you need to know about his intentions all along.
And here comes the part that I want to share with you guys, which was a promise from Biden.
Last year, let me say it again, our forces are not and will not be engaged in the conflict with Russia in Ukraine. Our forces are not going to Europe to fight in Ukraine, but to defend our NATO allies and reassure those allies in the East.
So you can see that from the beginning, the West say very clearly they would not go and help Ukraine, at least not with their troops. NATO would not put their troops on the ground. What they have been doing is, of course, giving weapons, giving tanks, giving airplanes and support to Ukraine, but not their own soldiers. And that to me shows that the West is not really fully committed to the defense of Ukraine. Now, let's look at the geography of this whole thing. What does it mean, a counterattack? Now, I have placed here this arrow because this to me is the point where the attack would make sense. I'm going to explain to you why. Even though you see this blue here, this is not water. This is supposedly areas that has been recuperated by Ukraine. Ukraine managed to get this area back. Now, the gray area on this map that you see here, that's water. And there's a very important reason, a very strategic reason why Russia got this area here. This is what gives Russia land access to Crimea. There was a bridge that has been destroyed last year, but this area provides Russia direct access to Crimea Peninsula and direct access to the sea. Now, the thing is, there has been another invasion, another war between Russia, I'm going to open brackets here, between Russia and Afghanistan, where they're fighting for the access to the sea. So access to the sea, access to Crimea via land is a very important to Russia. And I don't see any way in which Vladimir Putin would come to negotiate if Ukraine continued to gain spaces like here. To regain this space doesn't really mean much, or regain the space here doesn't mean much. Now, this area of Kherson is because this area gives a buffer for Russia to defend Crimea. So this area here is a very significant area. They already got regained here, but the thing is now, where you see this red line, there are certain obstacles. And you can see other areas of conflict here, but this is the most significant thing, is to break this. Let's look. So if Ukraine managed to get this area here, that is an area that if they continue to push this border and cut the land access from Russia to Crimea, I think at this point there is a damage and there is a chance that Vladimir Putin may come to the table and talk. But this is the most strategic and most effective counterattack that Ukraine can get. So I'm not sure where that's going to happen, but that would be, on my view, the best location for the attack to take place. Now, in order to attack that place, let's look at the obstacles. And before I go to there, I'm going to open another bracket here and I'm going to talk to you about what I think is very important. Military engineers. The military engineers of Russia are very disciplined. They're very known for their efficiency and discipline. They're one of the best on the world, at least in my opinion. I'm not expert on the military forces, but I do know and I have seen over and again that the engineers of the military in Russia, they're really good at what they do. Now, let's close the brackets and look at what they have done. Now, it's important to understand that in this counterattack, both parties had the chance to prepare. Ukraine had the chance to prepare for the counterattack. Also, Russia has the chance to prepare for the counterattack, to defend against the counterattack. Whereas Ukraine was not prepared to receive the attack from Russia. Now, some headlines and some news are already talking about how Russia has fortified 600-mile front line with anti-tank ditches, mazes of trenches, dragon teeth, barricades, and minefields. This is what the reports are saying. Now, let's talk about those things. And I think most people may not know what dragon's teeth is. Let's look at that. So remember I was talking to you guys about this map and this red line being the point where would be the efficient attack. The most efficient attack I think would be here, or if they manage to push here and get Crimea back. Now, I'm not saying that's what they're gonna do. If I am Vladimir Putin or if I'm defending this area, I'll be really concerned about this front line here. Now, what does it mean to go and advance? You can see here a little blue mark here. That means Ukraine have to gain a little bit of space here, a little bit more terrain here, but let's see what are the obstacles to be able to puncture a hole into this red line. And these are Dragon's Teeth. It is it's pretty much impossible for any tank, any vehicle of war to be able to drive through this. You can have bulletproof, whatever, it is very difficult. I want you to think how hard it is for a tank or any other war ground vehicle to be able to pass through this. There is about 1,000 kilometers or 600 miles of this. Now, these areas, I want to go back there into the map and show you. These areas here of defense that need to be punctured, some of them are about 5 to 15 kilometers wide. The first, you're going to have to go through a lot of soldiers, a lot of landmines, a lot of defense before your tanks can get here. Now, once your tanks get here, assuming you manage to pass through this or destroy this, create a gate, and remember, you're going to have to destroy this, you're going to have to give up your position. To get to here, you're most likely to trigger some kind of landmine for anti-tanks or anti-humans, anti-individuals. We're going to talk about that more towards the end of this video. Now, here's another example of the Dragon's Teeth. Now, notice the ramp here. Once a tank goes up here, it's very difficult for the tank to be able to aim or be able to hit a target. So these are some of the obstacles that are there. Now, assuming you pass through that, then you're going to have to go through those things, the barricades or the Czech hedgehog, right? Which is, again, these one are not grounded with the foundation to the ground the same way as a Dragon Teeth, because this goes deep into the ground. They're really solidly placed there. You're going to have to dig and pull those things out if you want to go. Those are made of very good concrete. Now, those are just pretty much laying around. But the issue is, no matter how you move it, it remains to be an obstacle. To remove this, again, you're going to have to go through a terrain that may have ditches, trenches, landmines before you can get to those obstacles. Not to mention the soldiers counterattacking you or defending your counterattack. And you may have to you may come across the Czech hedgehog that is a combination of the two. Now, these ones are a bit more hard to move because of the concrete weight, as you guys can see here, but those are some of the obstacles. And to me, the most significant is the landmines. Now, you may not know this, but there are two kinds of landmines. Again, one that can neutralize tanks and the one that can neutralize people walking by and step on it. So one has a possibility to be triggered with a very light weight, and the other one needs a much heavier weight, such as a tank, in order to trigger. But the thing is, let's say Ukraine managed to regain the terrain. What kind of terrain they regain? They will regain a terrain that has been heavily mined. 30% of Ukraine is already mined soil. That is the equivalent of 2 Austria. I put here Austria, so imagine this is Ukraine. There's already conquered area by Russia here, and 30% of whatever is there, some of the defense borders here, are already filled with landmines. And here's the thing, the areas that Ukraine has already reclaimed, once Russia realized Ukraine was going to be able to regain those, Russian soldiers lay a lot of landmines on those fields. So even if Ukraine regains their land or soil, it's not going to be useful to them because it's going to be filled with mines. Now, to get a mine and to place a mine, it may cost an army somewhere between $5 to $10 tops. For you to destroy or remove each mine, it takes about $400 to $1,000. Not to mention that about each 5,000 mines that gets removed, there's 1 death and 2 injuries. So just to see that if Ukraine gains the terrain back, it's going to be a terrain that's filled with landmines. Now, after all those obstacles, Ukraine is going to have to deal with anti-tank ditches. Some of those are open, some of those are camouflaged, and that will give an impediment to the tank. So any offense, if you have read The Art of War, you must have known that there's a phrase from Sun Tzu that every offense, every attack is a foolish act. We also use that on chess. So a counterattack, you're going to lose a lot more soldiers. It takes a lot more effort for you to be effective on an attack than it is for you to be able to defend. Now, when Russia attacked, Ukraine was not prepared. I believe the Russian soldiers are prepared for this counterattack. Now, what is the solution? What needs to happen for the two parties to come to the table? And here's where I want to share with you guys something else about two other wars that has happened in the past. One of them is the Yom Kippur War, which was a war between Egypt and Israel. Only when Israel has made the move and reached the Suez Canal and the Egyptians felt like they could lose, only then the Egyptians were willing to come to the table and negotiate peace. Now, I don't see Vladimir Putin being able to do that unless that portion of the map, which I shared with you guys, get cut off. Until then, I don't think Russia will come or Vladimir Putin will come to the table trying to talk in a possible arrangement of peace. Now, this war lasts less than 2 months. The other war that I want to talk about is North Korea versus South Korea. That war took 2 or 3 years for them to come to the table and talk and have a possible discussion of peace. However, there was no peace treaty, and most people may not know this, but between North Korea and South Korea, there's no peace. There's an armistice treaty, or an agreement, which is pretty much a ceasefire. Those countries are still at war, and I think in the year 1968 there was about 150 deaths on this war. So this war is still going on, and they stopped talking in 2010 or 2014. The conversation dialogue between them had stopped because of the escalation. And if you've been following the channel, you must have seen on the previous video talk about North Korea rocket failure and how the South Korea are picking up those fragments from the rocket that did not make to the space to find out how much technology North Korea has. So North Korea and South Korea are still at war, and they only came at peace once both parties saw there has a lot to lose. And I don't think Vladimir Putin is at that point yet. It may take 10 years or more for them to reach that point. So that's my view. My question is now, what is your view? And also it's time for me to recap and to wrap up this video. So we talk about the West and the Ukraine, how the West, in my view at least, has not yet decided if they want Ukraine to win. We talk about the geography, which portion would be important for the counterattack to be effective. I talk about the obstacles and the military engineers of Russia, and we talk about the two different wars, North Korea, South Korea war, and Egyptian war with Israel, the Yom Kippur war, as reference of what would take for a peace or a ceasefire treaty to occur between those two countries. Now, my question to you is, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think the West definitely wants Ukraine to win? Let me know on the comments below. And if you want to find out more about this kind of subject or find out more about other things that may affect the performance of your asset, consider joining our Crypto Vagabonds Academy. This is it for now. See you guys on the next video.